everyone, this is Dr. Heather Austin Robillard, and this lecture is going to be over interventions. Many of you are already probably familiar with interventions, if not from previous coursework, maybe because you've watched the popular A&E show Intervention. This lecture will discuss interventions specifically, what they are, when should they be used, and how do they work. We will also dispel some of the common myths about interventions. You should have already read the intervention handout located on Blackboard, which just tells you about the different types of interventions. So interventions are often believed that the whole purpose is just to get the addict in treatment. But that's not actually the whole purpose. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what is an intervention and what are kind of the reasons why interventions happen or needed. An intervention is a carefully planned out process. They should not be done spontaneously, and professionals who conduct an intervention put a lot of careful consideration into who is involved and what is the best tactics to be used. They also are helpful to kind of identify what is the specific goal for the intervention, because it may not just be automatic treatment. Interventions typically involve family and friends, possibly even colleagues or clergy members or other individuals who might be at stake for the individual's well-being. These individuals should be the individuals who really care about this person. During the intervention, the loved ones gather together to confront the individual, asking them to face the consequences of their addiction and asking the individual to accept some kind of offer of getting help or treatment. In the individual, some specific key things should occur. Some specific examples, the intervention should provide the individual with the addiction's specific examples of their destructive behaviors and their impact on the addicted person and their loved ones. The intervention should also include a pre-arranged treatment plan that includes clear steps, goals, and guidelines. You do not want to help get the addicted loved one to agree to treatment and then have nothing set up and have to wait to get that all set up. This would leave far too much opportunity for the individual with the addiction to change their mind. We also want to make sure it's very clear what each person's role is in the intervention. The person facilitating the intervention should help each involved person identify how they will manage their loved one's decision, whether it is to accept or refuse treatment. This might include helping a parent accept the fact that if a loved one refuses help or treatment, it might be time to cut them off financially, at least until they seek treatment. These can be hard things to do, but helping the loved ones identify and accept the roles that need to shift is crucial. The goals of the intervention would be to help the addict get help or treatment, but also to help the family regain control over their lives, which is usually hijacked by their addicted loved one's addiction. So let's look at who might benefit from an intervention. An intervention can help people who struggle with addictive behaviors, but who are in denial about their situation or who have been unwilling to accept treatment in the past. You can think back to the Stages of Change lecture. These individuals might be in pre-contemplation because they have not recognized the realities of their addiction. They do not think that they have a problem, or they recognize that they have a problem but are not planning to do anything about it, like the contemplation stage. Some specific examples of behaviors that might warrant an intervention could include alcoholism, prescription drug abuse, abuse of street drugs, eating disorders, and compulsive gambling. People with addictions often don't see the negative effects their behavior has on themselves and others. This goes back to being in denial or that pre-contemplation stage. It is important that professionals encourage loved ones to not wait until the individual wants the help. Sometimes it takes hitting bottom before someone decides that they want treatment, and loved ones can be supported in helping motivate the addicted individual to seek treatment now before things get any worse. This is the real goal of intervention. So, what are the signs that indicate a need for an intervention? Thinking about who may need an intervention, there are several signs we look for as professionals that might indicate an intervention is needed. For example, maybe there's been a significant weight loss. Maybe the individual has a really poor personal hygiene. There's been lots of fighting or arguing between friends, families, and significant others. They've made promises in the past to get help, but they aren't kept. And there's a lot of untruthful accounts of their whereabouts. Maybe there's even been accusations of possible crimes or petty crimes, and that they're in denial of their drug and alcohol use. These warning signs all have in common that they are early predictions of an individual's behavior starting to have real implications on the quality of their life, which can be seen in either their health, relationships, employment, financial, or legal issues, and may be seen in all of these categories. So, how does it work? An intervention usually includes the following steps. First is planning. A family member or a friend proposes an intervention and starts to form a planning group. It is best if a loved one consults a interventionist or a professional of some kind, maybe a qualified counselor or a social work, when planning an intervention. They may look easy to do on TV, but there are a lot of important things to consider, and a trained professional can really help navigate those. The next stage is gathering information. The group members need to find out about the extent of the loved one's problem and research the condition and possible treatment opportunities. The group may have arrangements to enroll the loved one in a specific program or have choices. Next, you would want to form the intervention team. The planning group forms a team that will personally participate in the intervention. Team members must set a date and location and work together to present a consistent, rehearsed message and a structured treatment plan. Professionals will typically let the loved ones know not to let their addicted loved one know what they are doing until the actual day of the intervention. Next, you'd want to decide on specific consequences. If the loved one does not accept the treatment or the help, those participating in the intervention need to be prepared for what they will do next. Each person on the team will need to decide what action he or she will take, and they should come to the intervention prepared for this possibility. Examples may include asking the loved one to move out, cutting them off financially, taking away contact from their children, or other real consequences that may be very difficult to put into action. Another important action would be to write down what to say. Each member of the intervention team should detail specific incidents where the addiction has resulted as problems, such as emotional and financial issues. They will discuss the toll the loved one's addiction has played on their life, the specific behaviors they have displayed, while also still expressing the care that they have for this person. The goal is to have each individual encourage that the loved ones seek help and change that they are offering today. The next step is the intervention meeting. Without actually revealing the reason, the individual is invited to the intervention. Members of the core team then will take turns expressing their concerns and feelings. The loved one is then presented with a treatment option and asked to accept that option on the spot. They are not given the time to think it over and get back to everyone. The reason for this is to make sure that the stories that were shared in that intervention are enough motivation to get them to go, and to not allow time for them to back out of it. Each member will then say specific things that they will plan to do if the addicted person does not accept the plan for treatment. The last step is the follow-up. Involving a spouse, family member, or others is very critical in helping someone with an addiction stay in treatment and avoid relapsing. This can include changing patterns in everyday living to make it easier to avoid destructive behavior. For example, if the spouse always goes out with their best group of friends to a bar or restaurant to watch Friday night sports, this event should be moved to a place where temptations of a bar full of alcohol are removed. Support may also include participation in counseling with the loved one, seeking their own therapy and recovery support, and knowing what to do if relapse occurs. It is important to remember that a successful intervention must be planned carefully to work as intended. A poorly planned intervention can worsen the situation. The addicted loved one may feel attacked and become isolated or more resistant to treatment. Should you consult a professional? Consulting an intervention professional or an interventionist can be an addiction specialist, a psychologist, or a mental health counselor that can help the family organize an effective intervention. It may be a good idea to have an intervention specialist attend the actual intervention to help keep things on track or to manage unexpected reactions. It's a good idea to involve a professional if the individual with the addiction has a history of serious mental illness, if they have a history of violence or possible suicidal behavior could be taken, if they're taking mood-altering substances, if they are in denial, become angry, or they tend to minimize the situation. It's especially important to involve a professional if you suspect that your loved one might react violently or self-destructively. If other family members are enabling the addict's behavior and or in denial of the addiction, having a professional may help get the whole family on the same page for goals of the intervention. The final point for this lecture video is to point out some of the common misconceptions about interventions. The first myth is you should wait until the person has hit rock bottom. Rock bottom is often used when discussing addicts and their addictive behaviors. Many believe that an addict cannot bounce back into sobriety until they've hit their extremely low point. The reality is that rock bottom can be very difficult to pinpoint. Rather than wait for this vaguely defined time, try to get help for the addicted loved one before things progress too far. The next myth is sobriety is possible if an addict is strong enough. Addiction is a disease rooted in a number of causes. Chemical dependency takes over an addict's brain and changes their neurological makeup. Addicts need more than just willpower to get sober. If you remember back to the theories of addiction discussed in this course, the moral model was one of the original theories used, but no longer accurate based on years of research. The next myth is rehabs won't work if the addict has already failed it. Just because an individual living with an addiction has relapsed in the past does not mean that treatment will not work this time. Relapse is typically a natural part of recovery, and that individual only needs to try again. Another myth is that addicts will sever ties with those staging an intervention. The truth is very difficult to predict an individual with an addiction's response to an intervention. Drug and alcohol abuse can make a person unstable, which is why it is always necessary to seek help of a professional interventionist. Just because an addict gets upset, this does not mean that they will sever ties. They will at some point realize that their friends and family are only trying to get them the help that they needed. Another myth is that interventions should be staged when the addict is under the influence. This is actually never a good idea. When planning an intervention, all possible steps should be made to ensure that the addict is sober when confronted. A person who is under the influence may be very volatile and will not fully process what is being said to them, which again stresses the need for their sobriety in this process. The last myth is that interventions should be staged by friends and family only. A professional interventionist is a vital part of making sure that the intervention is safe and effective. It can actually be very dangerous and very counterproductive to attempt to intervene with an addict without professional help. Always contact a professional interventionist who will help you devise a plan to make the intervention as productive and as healthy as possible. Finally, we covered the several myths about interventions and have looked at why these are nothing more than myths.